Hello, may I speak with David?
Hi.
Hi. David Bridwell, how are you?
Good. How's it going?
It's good. Yeah, I'm looking forward to speaking to you today. This will be episode 5 of Sam Lou Uncased, which is my new podcast series on contemporary songwriting practices and production, featuring DIY artists like yourself, informal conversations about what we do, how we find audiences, where we are when we sing, these kind of questions. So it's a really lovely opportunity to speak to you today. David, could you tell me what the view is?
What my view is?
Yeah.
I'm in my closet because I was aiming for optimal sound quality here. So this is a lot of boxes.
Is it dark?
No, I got some light going on. Yeah, this is not too caveman like, but still working out. I did buy a new microphone for this. So I'm excited about these new changes in technology to help advance my communication. So thanks for that opportunity.
Thank you. Thanks for getting in touch. Perhaps you could tell us in 7 words or less who you are. Have a go.
I would say I'm a folk singer. That would be the 2-word description in terms of my music. Singer-songwriter is another. And I'm interested in psychology and social psychology. I feel like I should tell you my little Twitter handle thing, which is pretty much folk singer, Ph.D, psychologist, blow up your TV. I also like blowing up your TV, the idea of that.
Could you tell me about that?
Yeah, the notion is just to be more purposeful about the media that we consume. And so I think that when you watch TV, you end up just falling into watching whatever happens to pop up. And so just making more choices about what you want to watch or why you're watching it, or even the choice of turning on the TV in the first place, not getting into the habit of just turning it on and letting it sit there and feeling like you have to watch something somewhere just because it's on. Yeah,
this strikes a chord with me. I haven't had a TV since 2006 when I lived in a studio flat in North London, and we didn't have a TV at the time, no bad thing. And then over the last year, since I moved to Glasgow, there's a TV in the flat which came furnished, and so I've been putting it on a little bit, and it's kind of strange for me. It's that noise in the background, which of course for so many people is such a comfort, isn't it? And then there's the other side of it, of course.
Yeah, I really resent it. One of the times when I've had to been exposed to TV was like in the gym in my apartment complex. And it has this way of getting your attention that is bothersome. It's like, it's hard to avoid it. And you can see the way they edit it, the way that there's like words scrolling across the bottom. There are all ways that are, trying to get your attention. And so that kind of bothers me about how successful it is at doing that.
Yeah, and that passivity that comes about, because of course if we're lying on the sofa not doing anything, you're not creating, are you? You're not making.
Yeah, I think because thinking about being thoughtful about the media that you consume, I try to listen to what the local music artists are putting out, or people who are touring through the city, try to listen to their music so I could decide if I want to go to their gig. And also just listening to interviews. YouTube is something that I really enjoy because you can really hone in on people who have a similar mindset and really feel that sort of psychological connection with them.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about my YouTube habits. Kind of Googling Indian reservations in Montana at 1 a.m, and you know, or that we can go to all these places that we can't go to. It's quite seductive, isn't it?
Yeah, you can discover a lot, which is really cool. And I think because I am interested in trying to just communicate with people, and so those are a platform where you can engage in conversations, like in the comments section, and potentially also, you know, through my own YouTube. When I get really excited or passionate about a topic, I try to record it and post it on there. And so trying to get involved in observing people's conversations so that I can contribute and, you know, come up with some new insight, I would hope.
Yeah, I'm just going to scroll down in my questions there. You release one song per month on YouTube, and could you tell us about that and how effective is this strategy?
Yeah, I've been writing one song per month since I've been writing songs, which is 6 years. And a year ago, I committed to telling everybody about it, which is to say that I would publish and put out each new song with like a video and promote it on social media. And then, of course, also tell people that that's what I'm doing. # one song per month. And at the time, a year ago when I did it, I think it was more popular, but you would see these people who were doing like one song per day or one song per week and so on. And I thought a lot about it, and I thought that the optimal amount would be one song per month. Because you have, say, 2 weeks to promote it on social media, which is reasonable, like 2 weeks to promote the excitement, 2 weeks to promote the actual thing, and then you move into the next cycle of 2 weeks to promote, 2 weeks to potentially you could have one gig every month where you can sort of use that gig to generate interest in that song. And then, so it's kind of this notion that people are always about what's next and what's new. And so a lot of the sort of counter mentality is to publish a very professional looking, high quality song, but because it's so costly, you can only do it once a year or maybe once every 2 years, but you're not satisfying that need to, like, even if that's a successful release, a month later, people forgot about it and they're like, all right, what else are you doing?
It's like this futurity, isn't it? Thinking about the project, as you say, people are always, what's next? What's next for you? I ask this myself at the end of the interviews to the interviewees quite often. And it's kind of like always that looking forward, isn't it?
Yeah, people are always going to be interested in more, you know, in most domains of your life, like your employment life, and also in terms of being an artist or a songwriter. And you yourself are never going to achieve something that makes you content and happy. So I think that acknowledging the striving, that's the exciting thing to me, is just the excitement of trying to achieve and knowing that once you've achieved it, like there's nothing at that point. It's just something that's on the internet, but the next thing is not to reflect on that thing that you're not working on anymore. It's to work on the next new thing. And so yeah, just trying to craft all these stories and things that provide context to what I'm doing, that make things interesting. I don't know.
It's like the notion of potentiality, you know, that we talk about achieving our potential all the time, but of course you can't achieve your potential because potential in itself only exists because it's not been achieved.
Yeah, potential exists because it hasn't been achieved.
Well, if you were to achieve your potential, then there'd be nowhere to go, would there?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the notion even of potential Yeah, people need, I guess, so I dove into this thing of just trying to communicate what I think and trying to find people who resonate that. Because I think everybody, when you have to put out music like that, and like you yourself, you're putting out these YouTube things and these interviews, there's a sort of narrative that you have to give yourself that allows you to kind of be okay with it, or not reflect too much on it, or not be too self-conscious. And I think that's part of like building up that narrative, is like that, yeah, you want to build a communication, and that you're not going to get unique human insights unless you actually connect two brains with each other in a conversation to arrive at a new place. You're not going to like get really passionate about something until you post some video that somebody challenges you and writes some nasty comment, and then you spend a day getting irritated and generating some articulate response to that comment, and now you've got that insight because you put it out there.
How does your grounding in psychology manifest in your songwriting, if it does at all?
I think that one of the things I've been really fascinated by is your own personal space and your own sort of energy. And I think that human insight of how to sort of manage your own energy, which psychology can potentially help with, just thinking about the mind space of others and trying to understand the mind space of others can help you understand your own mind space. And most of my thoughts come to me when I'm in a sort of space, like driving or at a bar, drinking a beer, listening to music. A lot of my sort of song seeds of my songs come to my head in those type of circumstances.
That's really interesting. Yesterday, I did my 4th episode with Mr. Alec Bowman, and we were talking about where the songs come from, and he said that they'll often come, when you're in the shower or in transit. So driving, it seems to me to be that movement initiates a lot of songwriting. Myself, a lot of lyrics come when walking or in the shower, or these kind of spaces.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That I think that there's a pattern, there's a rhythm in the movement.
Yeah.
So the notion that they can come in that type of scenario is really interesting. But I don't think that they really. So I talked about like the seeds of songs, which for me is like when the first lyric of a song would pop up. That's always a very organic place for me. And then often the remainder of the song could happen when I sit down and just give that lyric a little bit of attention and see if the next line pops up for me. But the sort of initial idea is always has this like sort of organic feeling like that.
When you say organic, what do you mean?
This notion of not trying, not being purposeful about I'm going to write a song.
Yeah. Is it a subconscious thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you try to like craft. I had this like sort of, I don't know if cheeky is the word, but this idea like how long does it take to, or how much time should you spend writing a song? Well, you should spend 24 hours a day writing a song, in the sense that you're getting good amount of sleep and you're eating well and you're generating a lifestyle that's conducive to writing a song. Like you're experiencing the world, you're going hiking, you're somewhat trying to enjoy your space and your reality in the music and things that you're consumed by. And by creating that scenario, it's sort of a rich environment for songs to come up that might be in line with your experiences like that. And
there are songwriters that talk about this and have said that they they never sit down consciously with pen and paper to write.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, I've met people who go up and like open mics and they're like, I wrote this song today or yesterday and here it is. And it doesn't quite work that way for me. I do have to write down ideas, otherwise I lose them. But I think that, if they maintain them in their heads, if they're able to do that, and then they solidify it quick enough so that they don't lose that memory. I think, and there's a lot of guitar players who, like, I was thinking of Greg Allman from the Allman Brothers. I think that all of his guitar playing and skills and technique was developed while he was like in public playing guitar in a band. It wasn't like practiced.
Any song a singer writes or sings is political. Do you agree with that? If so, why?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that anytime people are connecting with each other in any sort of way that is deep and potentially meaningful, that's political. So, because that's how people share anything that can kind of share unique human insights, fundamental human insights, is political. So the art would, because it connects humans like that, and it opens up these opportunities for communication and discussing what's happening in society and shaping what's happening in society, like broadening their perspective, works of art that can be really profound in terms of how you view yourself or others and the world. So, and even the notion of street performing is political. The notion that you can be allowed to communicate what you're passionate about to your society, to your local society. And I think when I was doing my 6,000-mile busking experiment, that's really the insight I was interested in about these cities, is how accepting are they of people, the local people trying to express themselves like that. And the healthier that little culture was, the more they were open to the local people expressing themselves, I would assume the healthier that city was.
Bringing me on to a question that I wanted to ask you later, but I'm going to bring it in now. Is there any point to being a singer-songwriter without an audience then?
Yeah, I think it's hard to even think of. Certainly the audience is going to affect what you create, in the sense that you know that you are creating it. Even if I write a song for myself, I know that it's going to be played in public, so you can't escape the fact that can come in and influence you in some way. And so I think music is fundamentally about people connecting and communicating with each other and for being shared.
Yes.
So I think that it would be incomplete if you were to just focus on writing a song without sharing it.
Yeah. Okay, that's lovely. So, Blue Ball Blues. This is one of your new songs, yeah?
Yeah.
So we'll talk about your titles later. Can you describe the process of making your new music video for Blue Ball Blues, which we can see online? I have done myself.
Yeah. So again, with the one song per month thing, I've been trying to create a music video around it. And I really think carefully about what I want to include. Like I want it to align with sort of the meaning of the song. And Blue Ball Blues is about kind of bent up frustration or not knowing what to do with yourself, feeling this sort of anxiety. And so at the time, I had spent like 3 or 4 days in Nashville. The weekend before I was in Nashville for 3 or 4 days, that's when I was like busking on the bridge, and I played at the Bluebird. And then I went to the Shoals the next weekend. And I was just kind of reflecting, like, why do I have to do all these things to entertain myself? Like, can't I just relax? But I found myself, my current song is always super in my head. It's like kind of going around in my head a lot. So in every video that I do for my songs, when I'm actually shooting, that song is like in my head and I can hear it. And I think that kind of impacts the way that I scan about in the scene. But I, started out dark. It was rain pouring on my truck and going through a bridge in the rain. And then the place I stayed at, just the things that they had, the cracks on the wall and all these images of time, these clocks and cameras, were just really fascinating to me. And then I threw some labyrinths in there, which also I thought made sense, in terms like labyrinths as these circular things that you walk about in kind of a meditative way. And that's the kind of trying to deal with that energy, that kind of uneasy energy, and find a way for it to dissipate.
Yeah, labyrinths, meditative way, but also frustrating potentially. You can't find your way out.
You're stuck.
Or you're going round in circles, and yeah,
that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that. So maybe you're right. Maybe I didn't quite see that there's a little bit of conflict in the fact that you are going around in circles, and when you succeed in the labyrinth, you're in the very middle of it. You're like not outside of it, but you're stuck in the middle.
Yeah. In terms of autobiography, on watching your video for Blue Ball Blues, we don't see you.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting. It's more like you're a protagonist, behind the camera. There's a lot of movement. You're walking around different landscapes in your locale. It's the general tendency, of course, for music videos to focus on the figure. And we see the performer frequently throughout the video. Was it a conscious decision to not show yourself?
Yeah, I don't necessarily like to make that type of music video. It's kind of like the standard, typical way. One, I think it's a little cheesy. I think you sort of need, I don't know, I guess my tendency is to say that you need higher production value and that you enter into the domain of this is a music video that officially, has all those extra criterias and expectations. So I think kind of removing myself creates this context where it allows a little bit more of forgiveness in terms of the quality, which one song per month is, I like it too, but also because it allows some forgiveness. It's like, this is my big music video, but it's not going to be like your fancy high production $1,000, $2,000 music video because I'm putting out one per month. And so if they know that part of the story, then that helps them process it and sort of gives me that leeway. And I want to encourage everybody to kind of allow themselves to not have such a strong need for this super high production value, perfect audio recordings, which is why I came out with a video recently called like Music Business Lessons from Bob Dylan. And basically I just talked about how his earliest recordings, you could almost view them as just a demo.
Yeah.
Because they're so pared down and his voice is not really great. And but he used that to get leverage to build his brand so that he had the capability then to create a band. And I think that's sort of the mentality that I would like to view my one song per month as demos, so they don't just serve as like finding fans potentially, but they also serve as trying to build up people who know me and telling, maybe the local radio station that I exist and potential places that can book me, and also advertising to potential people who could be in a band with me, you know, who could play drums and bass and lead guitar with me. It would be important that they get psychologically aligned and, you know, basically become fans of me if I was gonna find potential bandmates like that. So it's like an advertisement.
Sure.
that can serve a lot of potential purposes.
Yeah, that really, this really fascinates me, David, because I'm making a video at the moment and I'm asking myself all the questions that you are raising here about production, value, the fact that I work on my own as well. And I've got quite a strong image for the visual narrative that I want. And that I'm coming more and more into alignment with your thinking that I'm just going to put it out. I'm just going to make it and put it out. The song is called this thing called Love, and there could be so much pressure around that in terms of production, but I think we have to just relieve ourselves from that so that we have any kind of autonomy as DIY artists and in how we navigate this.
Yeah, you need to listen to the people and get feedback on what you're doing, and also process what you're doing yourself. So that's one reason why I like one song per month, is that I can kind of let it sit there with the mixture of other songs that I have. And I'm kind of like going through this weird thing right now where I'm not a super big fan of like my previous, like, say 6-8 months of songs don't really have like sort of hits that I super enjoy playing live. And so I need to like transition to this new thing where I start to see them as the songs that I need to be playing and try to incorporate them. How do they fit within my previous collections of songs? And that takes some time too.
Do you enjoy performing the songs again and again? Are you a performer that I'm thinking of Dylan, because you previously brought Dylan up, but say take Dylan as an example. No two performances are the same. Where do you sit on that?
Yeah, I mean, I want to be performing new songs always, or at least trying to do that. So once they're like maybe 2 years old, then they kind of have to go to the side when you play them in public. And so, and that's, I don't know, I guess a part of that is also because that you need to keep entertaining the people. And if you come out there and you say, it's always a little bit odd to me when somebody comes out there and is like, here's a song I wrote when I was 18. And it's like that's weird, because like did you write any new songs since then? Like, I don't know. But also for myself, to keep myself entertained and to keep growing. So it's very empowering to know that a year, you know, here I am sitting here at the end of 2019 with a dozen new songs, and those songs replaced a dozen previous songs in my collection that were not as good. So hopefully these 12 new ones are sort of more on the higher end in terms of quality and how much the audience will like them. And so that's very empowering to because I try to keep about 3 dozen in my memory to play it as like a sort of gig, to play a 3-hour type gig. And to know that when a year advances, a third of my songs are new and improved, and to think about where that could be, where I'll be a year from now and 2 years from now, it's very exciting. It would be different. And I think that's an intriguing thing that you set up too, when you tell people, I'm going to put out 1 song per month and I'm going to promote it, then that builds intrigue and to know that they have a sort of microphone and a thing that they're going to put out that we don't know what it is. It's
kind of capitalizing upon surprise in a sense, isn't it?
Yeah, it's I think it would be fascinating. A part of it is like, I think it would be fascinating if the major artists were to do something like that. I would be super curious if they just were to put out a song per month like that.
You're reminding me of a talk I went to the other night with an entrepreneur who creates immersive theatre in London, and he was talking about, well, he said that he saw himself as a responsible capitalist. At which point I asked myself the question, can such a thing exist? But he was talking specifically about the timeline of a new product coming out. So in terms of a song or an event, how the most successful marketing tool is the email mailing list, primarily because people will turn off notifications for Twitter, Facebook, Instagram on their mobiles, but they will always have their email coming in. So he was talking about a staged marketing strategy where he drip feeds the event, and then at the end of a few weeks doing that, he will then say tickets are limited, book them now, etc.
Yeah, that's so basically he was communicating about his marketing strategy. And it's interesting that it was called responsible capitalism.
Very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that they have to couch it in this sort of, I'm being capitalist, but I'm responsible about it.
I brought it up with a political philosopher the day after, and I just said to him, can such a thing exist? I'm not sure. And he threw back at me and he said, can such a thing as responsible democracy exist? And his point, go on.
That's a lot. There's a lot of stuff packed in there.
Yeah, there is a lot. Yeah, but his point was no, because if we can't have responsible democracy, there can be no such thing as responsible capitalism. But anyway, coming back to the songs.
I think that there's a place for I really love thinking strategically. Like, I'm trying to plan a tour and thinking, which highway am I going to go on? Because that involves, like, how are the people different in these different locations, in different states, and how's my response and my interactions different with them? So planning a tour isn't just about filling out things on a calendar. It's about the human connection in different places and the notion of growing that connection. So I love being strategic, and I have these scenarios, like one YouTube video every Sunday that I post, one song per month. I have I'm trying to develop a better timeline for this is how you promote the song. Like, in theory, you should have, here's your Instagram post and here's your Facebook thing, and it comes out at these times in relationship. Now, in theory, you should. It's a lot, and I don't really enjoy doing all that stuff. But I'm trying to further develop ways of considering all of those factors within when I put out a song. But the strategy and that sort of quote unquote manipulative mentality isn't involved really in the actual songwriting process.
No. Are you on Facebook? Do you use Facebook?
Yeah, I use Facebook ads to promote my songs and to try to drive traffic to my YouTube.
Right.
And actually what I've been doing lately is, I just think it's super interesting. I've been trying to follow this kind of word of mouth mentality of getting gigs, which is that if somebody tells me you should try to get a gig there, I just blanketly think, okay, I will do that. Because somebody psychologically connected with what I produced and myself, and they tied it to this particular place, and that's in theory a powerful thing.
Yeah, it can't be underestimated, can it? Word of mouth.
I just think it's a fascinating story too, to be like, I played this gig or I did this gig because of this person, and this is my like real world human connection to that location. I think it's fascinating to think of growing up your music in that sort of capacity. And I think that that's really how most of these sort of growth of being an artist happens, is that you just have this really powerful connection with the people that are present in your life that you engage with. And that we really shouldn't be sort of buy into this idea that you can just have some social media, super strong social media presence or some viral video or something, and that's how fame happens. Like, fame is having the ability to command a room and basically like having people be super interested in you in real life.
Are you interested in being signed?
No. Yeah, I think that there's so many stories about the difficulties of the music industry. It's like the prototypical, if that's the right word, is the Tom Petty lyric where he says, they'll make a meal of some bright-eyed kid, you need somebody looking after you. Yeah. So they'll make a meal of you. They'll basically, in the early stages, you'll do whatever you have to do to try to get on that. And then you have some cases where artists are obligated to put out work that they don't like really have ownership for, or they don't want to do, but because they signed and they don't. The notion that like we just psychologically think that we own what we create. If you write a song, that it's your song, but it might not be your song if you don't do the appropriate thing. And so the whole thing, this goes back to Blow Up Your TV. One of the messages behind Blow Up Your TV is no more gatekeepers. So we don't have to have these people that select the people who are supposed to be famous and popular. Like there's no reason for that when anybody can go out there and put their stuff out on social media. And so focusing on your own social media, focusing on yourself as the person to be relevant. That's why, like, when this strange thing that happens when you might get covered, say, in the local news, is I think that it's very exciting, like the possibility of being on TV, but TV nowadays is so focused on what's happening online. It's like they recognize that they're not really relevant. Like if you watch the 10 a.m. talking head shows, they just talk about what people are talking about online. And so you want, my mentality is, and this is not the case for me, but the approach or the mindset that I want to have is that I've built up all of this social media presence, and so I'm helping you out by being on your medium, like being on the local radio. I'm helping you out, and a part of that is just that I think that every artist needs to self-identify as a social media marketing agency in some capacity. And so I would like it to be able to think that I could try to promote my events and things like that, so that your own social media brings value to being on the radio or bringing on TV.
Yeah, I wanted that's all lots of food for thought there. I wanted to bring us on to Nashville, David. Could you tell us what's it like to busk on the bridge in Nashville as we approach 2020?
Yeah, that was something I've always been fascinated to do since I went to Nashville the first time and thought about playing music on the street. And initially when I thought about it, it was like for the calming nature of it, because you're standing over water, you're on this bridge. And so I just thought it would feel good and be interesting. But I found out when I was there that there was a football game. And then the notion of playing music while people were walking to the football game became super exciting and interesting to me. So now I was sitting there playing music and just watching the people, just the sheer volume of people. And that's one of the things that I really enjoy about street performing, is that it kind of allows you to just sit on the street and watch and process the environment in sort of a different way, oftentimes appreciating the buildings, because my own music kind of makes me happy like that, and it brings me to that, helps bring me to that space. So the people were just walking to this football game. It was like a wave, that was my perception, just this constant flux of people and this constant notion of like potential changes in the sort of collective energy of them that could happen based on little micro things. Like if it got too dense, if people get a little bit agitated, then that agitation can spread. And the fact that I'm participating in that conversation by potentially changing the energy upward by playing an energetic song, or bringing it down by being super mellow. And then, those were all really, and then this notion of myself feeling uncomfortable because of the amount of people that were just walking by on this bridge. There's no escape. So I was, stuck there. And if I wanted to leave, it would be more inconvenient than just staying and playing music. So I kind of put myself in a spot where I was just stuck there, and it was super fascinating.
You're sort of putting yourself in a situation, really. Well, there's lots of, there's resistance, and there's like that kind of space where it's easier to carry on at that point, and then what happens, Yeah,
this sort of emotional feeling of the crowd, basically. You're getting connected and tuned into that crowd, and the conflict of sometimes feeling like you don't want to participate anymore and you want to be separate from it, but you can't because you're stuck on the bridge. And it was pretty fascinating. And I would encourage, I think it's very interesting that Nashville is a city filled with musicians, and I'm not aware of any of them going out to the bridge and trying to expose thousands of people to their song like that. And I kind of would wonder, why are they not doing that? It's interesting. And so I would hope that somebody would see that and recognize that would be an interesting thing to do. Maybe go out, shoot a music video of your new song and get it in front of thousands of people's ears.
Yeah, it's very creative. You mentioned the Bluebird Cafe there. You did the open mic. Did you queue for long? How did that work? How did that go?
Yeah, I got initially into a conflict because I apparently cut in line because it was rainy. It was rainy, and so I just wanted cover from the rain. But there was already a line of people, but it was a haphazard, one of those early lines where they're sitting down and scattered about. And one of the stores did not let people stand in front of it, so I stood in front of the store, because nobody was there, which meant that I was cutting in line. And so but I wasn't cutting because I was a musician, and I had no idea where I'm supposed to go or anything.
You didn't know the rules.
I didn't want to be like, I'm a musician, I'm playing. That would be weird. So I just kind of didn't. But the whole thing is, I was fascinated by the fact that store didn't want people standing in front of it, because you would imagine that you have this unique circumstance where people are forced to stand in front of your store for an hour or two, and you have free access to their eyes, and you could do whatever they want, and you know about the demographics that they're music fans. And so I was just thinking, like, the store is taking the wrong mentality. And
did you tell them that?
I'm telling them that right now. But
I can see you doing that.
That's the way my mind, but that's the thing, is that the Bluebird is in a strip mall, and it's gotten even increasing interest because it was featured in the Nashville TV series. And so a lot of these people that are lining up for 2 hours to go there are doing it because they've seen it on TV, and not necessarily because of the original fame of the Bluebird Cafe. And so there's going to be conflicts in the neighborhood with these businesses in all directions.
Yeah, and what was the experience of performing in the open mic like?
Yeah, it was great. It felt really good, and they support songwriters, so I felt really good because I played a song that I was kind of passionate about, sending a message about calling your parents if you can, and appreciating that you can talk to them if you're able to talk to them. That's the message that I felt good about saying to that crowd, and they were super attentive, and it felt really great. And there's an excitement among all of the crowd, and especially among all the performers, where it's like, I'm playing at the Bluebird. Everybody's just so excited based on the mystique of the Bluebird Cafe.
Yeah, I was reading about that, and it is really fascinating, especially to someone like me, you know, over the pond, and so aware of Nashville as being the home of the mecca of songwriting and co-writing, and this Bluebird Cafe and that kind of magic of getting to perform there, and the ritual of the calling in, and the history of it, and the legacy. And so I suppose what I'm getting to is that historically there's this legacy of kind of transformation. You know, it's where the stars were born, wasn't it? And that the figure of the singer-songwriter has this implicit audience that are listening on tenterhooks for something to happen, for someone to be revealed. It's there's that authenticity that we assume from the figure of the singer-songwriter, and I think this is at the Bluebird Cafe. I imagine that even now, although not the same as it was, that people still wait for some kind of magic.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Really great articulation of that. And I don't really know. I think it's a little strange to me how in Nashville and so on, there's this thing of, I wrote a song for this famous person that you've heard, and this kind of fixation on whether it went to number one. Yeah. And so I think that the main thing is not the story of who you wrote a song for or what position on the charts it got, but the main thing is what kind of energy is created within that moment. I think that's kind of what we're all like looking for, is just for some uplifting kind of powerful experience that somebody can create, and that's the sort of major thing to analyze it by.
Yeah, and also the lyrics and the songs themselves that historically at the Bluebird, you know, talked about kind of changing, overcoming something, very autobiographical, confessional stuff. I just imagine how it is now. I'd love to go and just experience that. Yeah, but the open mic in general, as open mic servers now around the world, it's a really strong format, isn't it?
What do you mean?
Very democratic, the open mic.
Yeah, by definition, it's open, and so I think that it's really interesting. I really do like open mics for that reason, because everybody gets to share, and there's kind of, I don't know, like I get a little bit unmotivated by the notion of playing a gig where it's just me playing for the entire time. I think that like kind of sharing in a more social setting where you can go about and talk to people and relax, and is kind of interesting. So
yeah. When I started looking into your profile and into your songwriting, you really seem to me to be a really good case in point for this kind of question about where we are when we sing. I was reading Jonathan Wynn's Music City, and it has a quote by Buddy Killen. Can I just run this by you?
Mm-hmm.
So he's describing Nashville's duality, and he says it's a place you can get down or you can get up. Would you agree with that?
First of all, there's a lot of ups and downs in music, and that's the thing about open mics too. And so you just have to acknowledge that in order to have these really high ups, you kind of have to have high downs, because you put yourself in the space where you don't know what's going to happen. And I guess all artists, all people need to be tested and evaluated in some way. I guess that's part of it. Like, you can't just ask people to give you attention. You have to earn their attention. And Bluebird is unique because you get their attention without, kind of earning it.
Yeah.
The venue earns the attention for you. And it's fascinating that the scenario, again, going back to street performing, is that that's the most extremes in terms of not earning people's attention, because they're literally walking by. And for them to even stop is powerful in terms of impacting them.
Very much so.
The spectrum of getting people's attention when you're on the street is the largest. And then if you're at an open mic, at a brewery, in a loud venue, it's another case where you really have to try to command their attention and deal with the downs of, potentially failing or potentially not failing a connection that one night when the previous night you felt so good.
Yeah, you're putting me in mind of my first episode with Malachi, the Australian busker, and it's incredible to watch him on the street, because he has this very rich, sonorous voice that you're drawn in by. And when we think about how difficult it is for us as songwriters, singer-songwriters, performers, to find an audience online, it's saturated, and there's somebody getting people to stop in their lunch hour for 40 minutes watching him. The fact that a busker can actually get people willingly, to give that much of their time on their lunch break is quite phenomenal, I think.
Yeah, this was an experience I had in Louisville, Kentucky, which is the appreciation that I felt from people who were doing these sort of blue-collar suitcase type jobs, is that you're bringing this mentality and this perspective and this culture to them that they needed after living this life doing this kind of standard job.
Yeah.
It's like kind of refreshing for them. But yeah, I watched one of his videos, and he's super talented. He kind of knows the art of street performing.
Oh yeah.
He's clearly got many hours of street performing experience behind his belt. And the social sensitivity is one of the things that fascinates me. Some of the artists that I really recognize and like are super sensitive about the energy of the crowd. And, not just if you're a musician and you get distracted by the annoying drunk and you inadvertently are giving them the attention, then you're kind of following your own sort of quick, rapid, unthinkable instinct to just be distracted. And so you need to sort of recognize that there's all these other people who want to engage with you too, who are being responsible. And that's sort of one I noticed from a video that just popped up of his, where he was doing that. He was interacting with somebody who's getting too kind of inappropriate and demanding of attention through him. And he dealt with it in a really good way, which, clearly he's talented.
very skilled at it. He does talk about working the crowd, and humour and the role of humour. But his point is that if you can get people, an audience, to that point where they're laughing at themselves, you've kind of got them there, and they're in a place to receive. And so I mean, having watched him many times, it's a real skill. I think he's quite unique in how he does that. But generally, the way that buskers operate in that autonomous space. No matter where they are, they kind of create this little world, don't they? And then people come in, and as you said, people come in and they're on their lunch break, so they're giving their time, but they're perhaps in jobs they don't really want to be in. You know, the busker kind of comes into the humdrum every day and provides this little bit of romance or something else, and then they're back to the office at 2:00. So there's a real social function, as I see it, to busking as well. In that you're kind of giving somebody just something that might lift them in their day.
Yeah, I think that you're basically creating culture. You know, you're indicating that this is an interesting area of town, and it's an exciting thing. And I met interesting people that just talked to me while I was doing that. Speaking of one person just wanted to get on about his relationship issues, which was, I guess I made him feel comfortable to talk to me about that. But other people who talked to me about why they moved to that town and how much they love that town, and that I feel like I made a psychological connection with them just through my music. And that's a way that is just comfortable for me.
Tell us a little bit about Beale Street, driving around in Albuquerque and exploring the city centres, driving into Tulsa at noon on a Monday, people walking around with smiles on their faces. What are they looking for and why?
Well, I think that I lived in downtown Albuquerque, and the fascinating thing to me, it was exciting in some way because I would be walking. It could be like a Monday or a Tuesday or whatever at like midnight. I could be walking home, and it was exciting for me because you have to kind of guard yourself and be a presence to protect yourself and have, and so I would be sensitive to the energy of this notion that the people on the street have this sort of collective energy that relates to the safety of the street. And sometimes I would perceive that there was something like in the air more than others. And I think that there's a real truth to that. And that, sometimes somebody would come through Albuquerque and be a bad presence. They would go into coffee shops and ask people for money and then get upset with them if they didn't give them money inside a business establishment, for example, that type of circumstance. Now that person, if they're in that city for a week or 2 weeks, they've impacted a lot of those people that are on the streets. And so they've changed the energy of all of those people. And you can potentially read these sort of changes that can happen.
Yeah.
And then there can be long-term changes in just an entire town. If an entire town is down and struggling, you could, I think, perceive to see that in the cash registers, the people's faces. And so when I got to contrasting Oklahoma City with Tulsa, when I got into Tulsa, it was very striking to me that it's like, wow, these people are walking the streets and they have smiles on their faces. So if I want to consider a city to tour in or to visit again or to potentially live in, and you can instantly drive in and recognize this aspect about it, then that's a powerful piece of information to try to extract kind of big picture thing about what's going on in that city and what that city's about.
And also it says something about you, that you notice that they've got smiles on their faces, I think.
Yeah, observing people is really interesting to me. So I do self-identify as a psychologist.
I'm going to quote you now. You say on your website that magic is created when the locals congregate among the mixture of coffee shops, cleaners, record stores, dive bars, and empty storefronts.
Yeah.
What do you mean by magic here?
I mean, connections among people in the local community that leads to creative works, written words, art, music, things like the ones that we glamorize would be like Greenwich Village, where Bob Dylan and all of them got together and influenced each other and took the musical influences. Austin, probably like in the 60s and such. I'm not sure exactly when the magic early in Austin was happening, and in San Francisco with the Jack Kerouac and that group, Allen Ginsberg, the Beatniks and Big Sur area. That's magic when these influential people found a culture that actually depended on that culture, like maybe Bob Dylan and all those guys could have done something entirely different if they didn't find that community that they had that feedback, communicative interaction with to come to where they were. And so it can't be too fancy, there has to be some conflict. In some sense, the art and the creative expression is solving some conflict. It can't be too clean. There should be some empty, struggling storefronts. The coffee shops can be halfway full, not overcrowded, and it's also filled with locals. It's not filled with tourists because, again, the locals are trying to build up and communicate and understand what's happening in their city. And potentially then, once they understand what's happening in their city, then they can go in and affect and make changes about what's happening in their city. And sort of tourists kind of pollute that. And I think the locals intuitively know that at some conscious level. And
yeah, I'm quite envious reading about your driving around the States and being a kind of road trip fantasist as I am, even though I don't drive, so I need to sort that out. But you did the White Sands sessions. Perhaps you could tell us about the White Sands sessions.
Yeah, because I was moving away from New Mexico, I just went on this big push to experience what I wanted to experience, what I needed to experience in New Mexico before I left. And White Sands was always one of them. And you go there and it's basically just, white sand in all directions. And I think that there's a stereotype. I see a lot of artists that, they take their little picture with their guitar in the white sands with the sunset, and it's kind of like a cheesy, stereotypical thing to do. And in my mind, I was like, I'm not going to do something like that. So I didn't plan on it. But then when I got there, it was just too hard to resist. And the notion of giving, I really got in touch. The 2 songs that I sang and recorded there were about a close friend of mine who committed suicide. And the notion of the white sands, the desert, the dryness, it's kind of like death, basically, the desert, the extreme desert like that. And so I sang those songs and I thought about, here I am in this place singing these songs, and it allowed me to sing about it and, process it and appreciate it. So yeah, I think in some ways these experiences that I construct for myself, like the White Sands sessions and so on, really they're these ways to just try to process and help me understand what's going on and how to think about things.
Yeah, experience. I think that's really important in what you're saying. It seems to be that you are kind of documenting experiences. I'm working with autoethnography in my own research. This kind of writing about or documenting these experiences or these performances or productions, whatever it may be, seems to give us another way of understanding what we're doing.
Yeah, I think we fundamentally can't experience or fundamentally can't understand things unless we experience them. Just from a perspective of thinking about the brain and how the brain processes things. Because it gives you more connections, it puts you in that place. And so it makes a difference. And there's, just, I'm not sure if I have anything else in mind about that. I think that what you're doing is great, though, because we're in this position in society where there's such a focus on the data. It's like all the Facebook data, and actually focusing on the first person and trying to psychologically connect with people is like the antidote to that.
Wow,
so really communicating and pushing on that is great to have that out there.
Yeah, thank you. That's lovely to hear, actually. It's always nice when somebody tells you what you're doing.
Yeah, that's what you're doing. You're psychologically connecting with people to try to generate some unique insights.
Oh, thank you. I will use that line. That puts it much better than I can articulate it. I'm quite fascinated by how it. I've often thought I just need other people to write my own bio for me.
Yeah, that's how bios should be written.
I think so.
Yeah, like there's people, there's communications that I see where people are like trying to define themselves and what their description is. But most people got for example, their band names or their nicknames. People don't nickname themselves. They get their nickname because other people started calling them that, and often there was, some compelling reason. So yeah, listening and taking note of what people are saying and grabbing hold of that.
New Mexico. Why did you leave New Mexico?
Well, my job was moving, and that's essentially why I went on the 6,000 mile trip, was because when I was faced with the prospect of going with my job to another city in another state, I wanted to explore my alternatives, and I didn't know any of the cities that I was looking at. Like if I was going to apply for a job in Louisville or Little Rock and Richmond and so on, like what are these places? And so I felt like I really needed to take that time to understand the United States so that I have that leverage in saying these are the cities that when somebody tells me, I'm from St. Louis, instantly I can have some understanding of what that means because I've been there. And now when I see a job in St. Louis, or when I think about moving there, if I think about retiring somewhere, or where my music could have the most impact, or where the music community is strong and exciting. Again, like thinking of this notion of, you don't want like Greenwich Village or San Francisco today, which is sold on the story of the past. You want to find the places today that one day will become those places before anybody knows about it. And so the search for those places is what's super interesting to me.
Yeah, I had a friend who taught with regard to Nashville as the songwriting mecca compared to Glasgow, for example. His point was you're better off in Glasgow than somewhere like Nashville, where it's all kind of happened. And it's finding the next place, isn't it? The next place where something might happen.
Yeah, that's why I kind of gravitated to Louisville and Charleston, West Virginia, is because when I went there seemed to be a need for that in the culture. You were fulfilling a need. You're not fulfilling any need if you go to Nashville. They don't need you. I got kicked out of the farmer's market there. All I gotta say is it's the only place. Farmer's markets are usually my favorite and the best places, but they asked me to leave.
Were you causing trouble?
That's interesting.
I mean, I'm interested to know what you were doing. Were you stealing the apples?
For busking, for playing music at the farmer's market. I don't know. I don't want to get off on a huge rant, but a part of the street performing is, again, the importance of socially recognizing things instead of making a blanket law or a blanket regulation that people just pass with and follow without thinking about the individual circumstances.
Yeah.
And so you have to really navigate the sort of details of each interaction on the street. And that, in a sense, these laws, it's like they hide from conflict. Like, we need to also be able to process conflict and deal with conflict and potential conflicts on the street and communicate about that. Communicate to others about how to better, be socially connected, and especially when we're distracted by this sort of artificial social world that's on our phones, computers.
Yeah. David, where is the singer when they sing?
Hopefully they're in the room.
It's not a trick question, by the way.
Yeah, that's a super interesting question. I do think that they need to be in the room, in the sense that, and I say this because I saw a show last night where the singer closed their eyes throughout the entire show, and it was clear they were in their own head, and so they never bridged the gap between the audience. And it was really interesting because it was such a mellow show, yet people got rowdy and kicked out, and somebody got kicked out because they weren't getting the energy fluctuations weren't appropriate, and it was all very interesting. But when you're singing about a song, when I sing about the song, for example, about calling your parents, that I wrote about my own parents, I want to bring myself in my head to the imagery that I sing about. My daddy drove a forklift at the Vlasic pickle plant, cucumbers in a pool of spice when he met my mom and dad. I want to be thinking about those things when you're singing about them, because if you yourself are bringing up that imagery in your head, then the audience can more clearly bring up that imagery as well.
Yeah, again, back to connection there. I wonder where we are in spirit when we sing as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I think I do. I just try to feel this, sometimes I try to feel this wave of the audience, their attention trying to flow toward me. Sometimes I think that's really interesting. And so thinking about the energy of the room in that sort of way and changing that energy. Like my cousin, Neil Gregory Johnson, he's doing this 100 breweries in 100 days tour right now. But we were talking about this, and I was talking about the Friday night energy, the sort of Saturday night energy of the crowd, which is really high, kind of edgy, or kind of constant stimulation. And he says that the musician's job in that moment is to calm the crowd down. So I don't know if spirit overlaps with that sort of, because it is a bit spiritual to be thinking about energy flowing like that, but
yeah, I think it's an interesting question in a sense, where is the singer when they sing, because we can think of it in terms of time or space. So I'm quite drawn to the physical location of the singer in real time, but then also where are we when we find this song, for one, what kind of place are we putting ourselves in, or are we going to? There's always this sort of movement somehow when we're performing as well, again. And then there's the narrative of the actual song itself. Where are we in narrative, as in the lyrics? So you could be singing a song about the witch trials. You're suddenly plunged into some historical context there, as in would be the case in folk song, traditional song.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. And, it's not all about where the song or the movie or the novel takes you. It's about the thoughts that arise while you experience it, which might not be related to the movie or medium at all. Like, I was just thinking about James Joyce when I read one of his books, and I didn't understand anything at all about what was happening, but I enjoyed it so much. I had such a good time reading it because of the thoughts that came up in my head. And so, yeah, that could be the case for the crowd. I was the crowd as well.
David, what's next for you? What are you working on right now? What are you going to do tomorrow?
Oh, well, yeah. So I've been hitting up a lot of open mics and trying to build up my local community. And I am going to try to explore Alabama and get gigs all around the state, and use music as a excuse to visit these cities and try to understand and see what they're about and what the people are about. And then continuing on one song per month, I've got a lot of songs that I am working on that I'm super excited about. So I'm really looking forward to putting those out there.
That's wonderful. I just want to thank you again, David, for joining me today. It's been real fun talking to you. And I wish you best of luck with everything.
Yeah, thank you so much. Same to you. I enjoyed our conversation.
Very much. You take care, okay? See you.
Okay, you too.
Bye.